If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. The psalmist is obviously speaking of the voice of the Lord, but I think for all of you who've been here all weekend, it also applies to me, right? Probably saying, what else can he possibly tell us? If today you hear his voice, harden not your hearts. I remember whenever I was a young kid that I went up to my mom and dad with this very well planned out debate or reason or proposition for them as to why I should receive an allowance. Right? And I had a whole scheme. I would get a certain amount of money for making my bed, a certain amount of money for, folding clothes, and I had it all done up. It was very, very well thought out. And so, being the good parents that they are, they listened very attentively. And they allowed me to give my whole spiel about how much I should receive and why I should receive this allowance. And my dad responded to me, "That sounds great. But how about I allow you to sleep in the bed that I bought and you go ahead and make it?" And he responded to each of my requests with similar sarcasm and shortness. I don't know where I get it from. But the amazing thing is that I was asking for a very small amount. I wanted like 50 cents to make my bed or $1. It wasn't a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things. I wasn't asking for much. But they had already given me a whole lot more than what I was asking. And as I got older, I came to realize just how much they had given me. And I even, in my own way of dealing with things in college, I started to realize all this stuff. And I even I was a science engineering major, so I was a nerd. And so I even started with my calculator, right, to try to calculate about how much money it costs to raise me. Right? It cost them many more gray hairs than it did money, but it cost a lot, you know this probably, it costs a lot of money to raise a kid. And so I started to think to myself, how in the world can I possibly pay them back? I was maturing a little bit. I have a long way to go still, but I was realizing that they were good to me, that they had done so much for me, and I wanted to do something in return. And so I said, well, how can I pay them back? Right? Maybe I can send them on a nice vacation. That would be wonderful. But that wouldn't make up. That wouldn't come even close to doing anything compared to what they had given me, right? In a monetary sense, but also bigger than that. How could I possibly pay them back for what they've given me? And so eventually I came to realize that I would pay back my parents by living a good life. Right? I didn't think about the priesthood at this point just yet, so I said, well, I pay back my parents by being good to my family. Right? By giving them what my parents gave to me. By being a good parent. Now I pay back my parents by trying to be a good priest. Right? And so in that way, I pay them back, in a sense, what they gave me. Because even if I had the money to give back to them, they wouldn't want it. Right? That was part of their love, was giving of themselves, giving of their resources to raise me, right? To provide for me, to help me to become a somewhat good person. And I think of this today with that second part of our gospel that we're presented from St. Luke, that we are to recognize ourselves as unprofitable servants. It sounds kind of harsh, right? But a lot of the things that Jesus says are harsh on purpose so that we understand, we're shaken out of our comfort to realize what he's trying to teach us. And so he says, right, which one of you, having some servants working in the field, would tell them to come and eat before you when they come in from the field? And the answer is none of you. Right? That's not how it works. You're paying them a fair wage, we assume. Right? They're getting what they deserve from working. And so why would I treat them in a special way. Right? They're going to be able to eat just after I eat. Right? That's how they would treat him. And so Jesus is trying to make this point, right, that we are the servants. That we are the ones who should be responding in this way. Like my story about wanting an allowance, right? We sometimes go to God and demand things, and we forget just how much He's already given us, right? What we ask for is very small in comparison to what He's already given us. That's part of what we reflected on this weekend, right? That God has given us creation, right? Everything that exists is from God. We exist because of God. He's given us the prophets. He's given us His Son, Jesus Christ. He's given us rebirth and baptism and the sacraments in the church. He's given us all of these things. He's given us all of this stuff. He's given us, most of all, the promise of salvation. That if we're faithful to the life He's called us to live, that He gives us this great gift of being with Him forever in heaven. And so, in reality, we are unprofitable servants. Right? We have done only what we were obliged to do. And so, as we get older in the faith and we mature in the faith, just like I did in my natural life, we come to realize just how much God has done for us, how much He's given us, and how unworthy we are of what He has already given to us. And so during my time in the seminary, this idea of how much my parents had done for me and sort of relating that to how much God has done for me played a big part in my later stages of formation as I was getting closer and closer to being ordained a deacon and a priest. And it was actually the inspiration for the quote on the little card that I had in the back of church that I asked you to pick up. Right? How can I repay the Lord for His goodness to me? He's done so much, right, that I can't even begin to explain, right? I can read off the list that I've listed several times, but that doesn't even begin to explain how much He's done for me, how much He's done for each one of us. And so I started to feel this sense of gratitude, but in the same way as with my parents, I started to say, how in the world can I possibly repay God for all of the good things He's done for me? Right? I can't give it back to Him in the sense of taking it away from me and giving it back. He doesn't want that, just like my parents. Right? It was a free gift. It was because of His love that He gave it to me. So He doesn't want me simply to unburden myself of it, if you will, and give it back to Him. But He does want me to give it back to Him through my life. Just as my parents are incredibly happy seeing that I'm not a complete failure, right? That they see me trying to live this good life, that they see me somehow implementing the teachings that they thought were falling on deaf ears. Right? God wants to see me live that life that He's instructed me to live. That's how I repay Him for His goodness to me. And so that quote that's on that card, how shall I repay the Lord for His goodness to me? The cup of salvation I will raise. I will call on the Lord's name. So the greatest way that we can repay God is living a good, holy life. And especially doing what we come here to do this morning. Right? By taking the cup of salvation and calling on the Lord's name. Right? We are a Eucharistic people. We are a people of thanksgiving. And so we come here this morning to give God thanks for the many gifts that He has given us, for the life He has given us. And we ask Him to continue to shower upon us His grace, to continue to stir up into a flame His Spirit within us, so that we can always show that we are thankful people by the way that we live.